One of my hobbies is astronomy. I give 2 or 3 talks per year at the Memphis Astronomical Society. A couple of years ago, I did one on solar storms. This is the sun. Every 11 years, the sun goes through what's called a solar maxima. It's an increased period of solar activity where it's a higher susceptibility to an explosion on the sun, spewing a large amount of solar radiation out into space, called a coronal mass ejection. Put this in perspective. Imagine the mass of 100,000 aircraft carriers carrying the power of 10,000 nuclear bombs moving toward Earth at a quarter of the speed of light of electrically and magnetically charged solar material. Very, very powerful. Now, the Earth's magnetic field shields us from these events. So that's why there's life on Earth. It's not just because the Earth has an atmosphere, it's because of the magnetic field. If it wasn't the magnetic field, the sun would strip away the atmosphere and life would die, the oceans would boil away, etc. It would become like Mars. And so for most of the time, these types of events, these coronal mass ejections, just go around the Earth. But every now and then, a really, really bad solar storm will hit and severely impact the Earth. And by the way, this is what causes the aurora borealis, too. Now, if we get a really bad solar storm, it can destroy the power grid for a very long period of time. And the culprit is these extra high voltage transformers that are not easy to replace. They weigh about 200 tons each, cost about $10 million a piece to build, and it requires 6 months of exquisite craftsmanship. There's about 300 of them in the power grid. If one goes out, it's not the end of the world. But imagine a scenario in which a bad solar storm overwhelmed the magnetic field and all of them blew at once. Power goes out everywhere. The fallout would be no electricity, no light, no heat, no running water within a day. Food distribution would stop within a month because you can't pump gas. Patients needing blood transfusions and insulin would die. Normal commerce would be replaced by black markets and violent crime. The power would be out for months, years, possibly decades. The National Academy of Sciences did a report on this and estimated that as much as 1/3 to 1/2 of the population of the civilized world could die if this type of event occurred. It's called a magnetic apocalypse. Our power grid is dangerously vulnerable. Now, fortunately for me, my best friend is Amish. And Amish people don't need electricity like normal people do. And this is a great example of the power of MIG. You never know who you're going to meet in this group. Gene is a guy I met 2 years ago. I didn't know him from Adam. And he and I started talking. We started hanging out, got to know each other, and became the best of friends. And he has a very interesting business. And I get this question a lot. You know, are you guys related? Are you guys brothers? So Gene and I did some research on this. And it turns out we have a very interesting family tree. And it turns out we are related. I mean, that's our Uncle Bruce. And that's our brother Vin right there. And then we got this guy. He got really corrupt. And then, of course, Mr. Clean. So this is Gene and I. This is our family tree. So you just never know who you're going to network with. But anyway, Gene has a business. In addition to being a real estate investor, Gene also has a business selling portable sheds. Barns, gazebos, carports, play sets, etc. And when he sells these things, he does it primarily on RTO financing. RTO is rent to own. And the way the process works is Gene has a company called ProBuilt of Memphis. He'll sell a shed to a customer. They can either pay all cash or they can finance it on an RTO contract. And this is available to investors like me. So in addition to real estate, I buy RTO contracts, and you get an idea of how some of these deals break down. Just hypothetical numbers: $6,000 purchase price, $277 per month payment, 36 months, I'm turning $6 grand into 10 grand, 66% ROI over 3 years, or a 22% annual rate of return. And you can see some of the RTO contracts I've done with Gene, and the rates of return I'm getting are somewhere around 30 to 33%. And it's just it's a great way to get low amounts of cash working for you. So Gene and I got together and we created a course called RTO Goldmine to teach investors how to do this. And it's 100% digital, it's online, there's a membership site that you can go to, download the videos, go through the content, instant fulfillment. And this is a great example of the power of MIG. He and I met here, we networked, shared information, got together, and created an info product. And it's something else that we're going to be exploring as the year unfolds. How we can actually, this is something that can be repeated again. There's a lot of people in this room who are doing things in their business that have some great information that could easily be turned into a product or monetized. JFK and Eisenhower. This was shortly after John F. Kennedy was elected. He had a moment in his presidency where he made a fatal blunder, the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. And at that time, Castro was a real problem because Cuba was going socialist. And Kennedy bought into a strategy of invading Cuba using a CIA operation, Cuban exiles, to overthrow Castro. Turned out to be a disaster, one of the low points in the history of the American presidency. Shortly after that, he met with Eisenhower, and Eisenhower basically quizzed Kennedy on what went wrong and found out basically that the way Kennedy got information out of the generals was inadequate. He did not really get everybody in a room to have a full debate. He just kind of went one-on-one with people and made a decision without really getting the full information. Fascinating study in the history of the American presidency. And it's an illustration of anytime you take over an organization, past presidents and their experience running an organization are invaluable to you. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our last speaker of the evening, and that is a former president who has done some phenomenal things within our group, and that's Mr. Kevin Perk, Mr. Landlord, Mr. President.